So it's January 15th, the end of the week. We started the week with a video about magic squares and Morse code. And I was going to talk about abacus, but I'm going to wait till next week. We can talk about different ways to doing arithmetic with beads, starting with the ancient Chinese abacus. So I wanted to look a little bit today instead, to finish up the week, on using color to look at fractions. So let's take a look at what we have. So today is the 15th. I don't have the big numbers with me, but I do have the small ones. Here we have 1 and 5, making 15. So 1 is in the tens and 5 is in the ones. So this is 10 plus 5 is 15. And they create the 15 in the hands with the magnets, which is really nice. Okay, well, let's look a little bit about doing fractions. So I have out with me both my number links and the little numbers. And you see the colors on the wood don't quite match the colors of the fabric. That was planned that they would be close, but it's very hard to get the definition of color on the wood as much as you can on fabric. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. When you get paints, you can mix them to however you want them to be. On wood, you'd have to put it on a more basic white base for you able to not have the absorption of the color into the wood to change a little bit. But let's look at these and say, all right, I made these to be a color wheel, which means if you bring 0 in, he's the gold, and you bring it in between 9 and 1 to go around the circle. But let's leave 0 in the middle for a bit. And let's say, all right, this is 7. 7, the color of 7 is magenta. This is one of the 3 colors of the toners that you put in a color printer. The 3 colors you do use are cyan, which is 4. It's a light blue. This is actually cyan. Yellow, it's called process yellow, and magenta. These are the 3 colors, if you get a color printer, the 3 colors that you will get as the toners. You get black also, but the 3 to mix all the colors together to make the other colors come out of these 3. Some people think it's red, blue, and yellow. It can be RGB on your computer, but it's actually from the painting point of view, more from these 3 as they mix in your color toner. So there are different varieties of how they mix, but that is how your color toner. And when people say, what is cyan? What is magenta? This is magenta. So I made them the color 7 magenta, which is actually the color from the toner. And number 4 is the cyan, and yellow is process yellow. So you notice we have 2 numbers in between. Between the 4 and the 7, we have 5 and 6. Between the 1, we have 8 and 9. And between 1 and 4, we have 2 and 3, and 3 turn over. Okay, so other than the 0, which also comes in to make the 10th one. But if he's in the center, you actually have 2 colors between the 2 toner colors. And here you have 2 between the 2 colors, and here also. Okay. So the question is, how do we make other colors from them? And how do they represent fractions? So if you want to make, for example, between 4 and 7, you want to make a color that's in between, and here we have 5 and we have 6. If you want to make them equal, let's just make it even easier first of all. Let's suppose we want to make a color in between these 2, right in between. How would you make a color that is halfway between these 2, and what's it going to look like? Well, that means you would use half of this color and mix it with your palette and your paints, and half of this color. And what kind of color is it going to be? Well, it's going to be sort of a reddish light blue, because it's going to have half of this color and half of this color. And I would say to you, if you have any watercolors, that's particularly good to play with, but you don't want to get it too wet. So you mix up a kind of a blue, and you mix up with another kind of a magenta or a hot pink, and see what you get if you take half of the one and half of the other. Now, if you have oil paints or acrylic paints, it might be a little easier to do because you don't have to worry about not putting too much water. But take half of one in the volume and half of the other, mix them together and see what you find, see what you get. Now the fact that we have 2 of them in between, how would we find, so that's like the color that would be in the middle here, between 5 and 6, all right? Because if it's half this and half this, you're going to get something in the middle of these two. So then you can think, all right, how would I get something more like the 5 and less like the 7, because it's right next to the 4? Well, I think if you think about it and you play with your colors, you're going to say you put more of this color and less of this color. So you might say, all right, let's try 2 blobs of this and 1 blob of this. So it's like 2/3 of the 4's cyan and 1/3 of the blobs of the 7. And will you get closer to the 5? Well, I'll leave that to you to try and figure it out. Okay. And then the other hand, how would you get the 6 with the more violet look? You take maybe 2 blobs of the 7, the magenta, and 1 blob of the cyan, and you'll get something that's a little closer to the magenta and further away from the cyan. And you keep going. So now we get, like for example, if I know this is 9 and I know this is 7, how would I get an 8? You take sort of like half of the 7 and half of the 9, mix them up, mix them up, mix them up, and you'll get something like the 8. Okay. Now, I didn't develop them quite that way. I wanted 8 to be a very royal red because that's a very big color in China, and 8 is a lucky number of China. So I wanted that to be a royal 8. I wanted 7 to be the magenta from the toner because everybody's going to be familiar with that, and you can see that's what magenta is. And then getting the orange for 9. Orange is a very difficult, sort of unstable color to get very easily, but it is in between the 1, which is the processed yellow, and the processed magenta for the toners. So think about how you start with, if you start with these 3 colors, just as they are, you can create all colors from them. By mixing them and taking different amounts of each one of the colors will give you all of the other colors. So we can go through with it. These are the 3, essentially the primary ones for the toner. Then you can get secondary level by mixing them together, and then tertiary level. We'll do more of this with the fractions with actual color wheels later here in January and February, so you really get the idea how if you start with the 3 basic colors that come through the rainbow, but here it's the toners, how you can mix them and get all the colors that come on a printed piece. This is the Numbers Lady. We'll talk to you next week. This is the end of the middle of January 2021. Bye-bye.